Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our discussion panel on zero-party data and personalization in digital marketing. My name is Andy Locke. I'm the moderator for today's panel. I am the managing director with Response Labs. We are a digital marketing agency focusing on CRM and loyalty programs. First, I want to introduce our panel of experts here who will be discussing the topics that are part of this discussion panel. First is Melanie Butler. Melanie is the manager of CSM and loyalty strategy for Giant Food, which is a grocery brand part of the Ahold Delhaize family with stores in Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, and D.C. April Falcon-Das. April brings a wealth of experience to the panel. She is currently the executive director at the Georgetown University Law Center Institute for Technology, Law, and Policy, and has previously served in positions with Saul Ewing Arnstein, the NSA, and the U.S. Senate Select Committee during the Russia investigation. So she is going to be really bringing in a point of view on data privacy and the consumer rights side of the discussion. Kristen Reagan is the Vice President of Marketing and Experience Design for HMR Weight Management Services, which is a diet and lifestyle change program offered online and through hospital and health systems. And lastly is Jatinder Singh. He is tasked with spearheading data science innovation and thought leadership across DDB. He is currently their chief data officer, and he brings also a wealth of data-driven creativity experience with brands such as AT&T, Ford, IBM, McDonald's, Pfizer, and a whole litany of others. So we're very excited to have all of you here joining us. And we're going to go ahead and just jump in with our questions. I should note, we're going to be talking about topics in 4 key areas. We're going to be focusing on zero-party data compared to other forms of data collected, like first, second, and third-party data, which if you joined earlier, you saw some of those definitions. The role of customer loyalty in collecting zero-party data, and customer expectations versus reality with personalization, and finally, the real value to business when using personalization in marketing. So let's go ahead and get started. Zero-party data, it's a hot buzz word coined by Forrester. And as of today, how more or less valuable is zero-party data compared to other forms of data collected, like third, second, and first-party data, and why? Kristen, let's start with you.
Sure, thanks, Andy. So I can talk a little bit about the role of first, second, third-party data in our marketing mix. All of them kind of have different value. The closer that you can connect the data to the source, the better. So first-party data for us is just so important. That's the data that we're collecting directly from our customers. So HMR is a diet and lifestyle change program. We have compliance factors that our customers kind of rely on to be successful in the program and use an app where they enter every day, they track their weight, they're tracking all of the compliance metrics with our program. So there's tremendous opportunity in that app to really support them, to use the information that we're seeing that they're entering every day to, identify struggles, give them supportive content that can help them be successful, or reward, really great work. So for example, we have our users do track their weight, and when they reach weight loss milestones, we're able to put fireworks in the app and really congratulate them for reaching that milestone. So first-party data in terms of customer retention and how we keep our customers happy is so important. It's also really important for marketing, right? Because we can use the data in our CRM and find customers that behave like our existing customers. So to create lookalike audiences with first-party data is so important. The problem from a marketing perspective is it's not scalable. We just don't have enough of it. So that's where really the third and second party data becomes so important. It's less reliable, so I wouldn't say that you make decisions based on some of this, but finding new audiences is critical for us to grow. So using third-party data, understanding who our customer is to find more customers that behave like them. So for example, at HMR, we know that 75% of our users are female. They're between the ages of 50 and 65, and we know the affinities they have. They love to garden, they love value shopping. So we can work with a third-party broker to try to find more people that behave like our audience and really widen that net. Second party data is the kind of the same deal. It's a little bit more transparent. You know the source that it comes from, but it fills that gap. So similar example for HMR is we know that our customer index is very high for AARP. So we're able to work with AARP to do direct site buys on their site, to include content in their email newsletters, knowing that their customers are more likely to be interested in our products and services. Zero party data, though, is really like the golden goose. It's information that your customer is willing to give you that uncovers their motivations, their frustrations, their uncertainties. So we launched our spring summer diet season a few weeks back, and we included a personalized assessment on our website. When you are losing weight, it's very personal. Everybody has different reasons why they struggle with their weight. They have frustrations with programs they've used in the past and failed, and being able to really understand their specific struggle, their doubts and uncertainties allows us to thoughtfully create content strategy that really speaks to their needs and make that emotional connection.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Melanie, what are your kind of quick thoughts on the value of zero-party data and whether it's more or less valuable than other types of data?
Yeah, sure. So similarly, we use all different types of data. Giant's a large brand, grocery brand across Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, and the DC market. So we have access to not only a good amount of first-party data, but also second and third-party data with some partners. I think Kristen did a great job explaining what the value of first, second, and third-party data is, but what zero-party data really does is it provides that emotional connection with our shoppers. It helps us understand what they want instead of just it being a need. Grocery shopping is a need. We all do it. And there's also a lot of competition. So really getting to see what our customers want from us is extremely important, especially as we start to launch other services, expanding flexible rewards, our loyalty program, launching our pickup and delivery services, et cetera. What do they need from us to continue to want to shop with us? So I think that's really the value of zero-party data.
And Jitender, from your position as a chief officer overseeing data, can you talk about your perspective on zero-party data compared to others?
So I think the question regarding the value of first versus second versus third. As I said, at DDB we have a plethora of clients, going across a variety of industries. And working with all of them, I'd say the universal truth is that it's not an either or. So we're seeing sort of like, value coming from first, second, third, and zero-party data. We see it as being part of the mix. And so one of the things that we look at as we're looking to sort of like migrate from zero-party data where individuals are giving us permission, raising their hands and saying, let's have a dialogue, let's have a conversation, we're interested in having a relationship with you. We take that in a phased manner. Sometimes we say ask for a date and not for a marriage. So we're not asking for everything at one go, and permission and the value that you're going to exchange during that dialogue is extremely key for us. And I think it's been mentioned by the earlier panelists, by Kristen and Melanie as well. One of the things that's extremely important is to ensure that we sort of like, generate insight from that data. How do we then connect that zero-party data to first-party data? So initially people raising their hand and saying, yes, I'm interested in hearing from you. As we start to foster that dialogue, that then leads to first-party data. So that could be transactional data or other information that they're sharing with us. We then start to mine that data and start to deepen that relationship to build that emotional connection. And then typically we're also then starting to augment that data with third-party data, so information that we might not necessarily know on an individual, but then starting to source it from trusted third-party partners, as well as we start to merge that data with the zero and first-party data, as we then start to further profile and personify those individuals to start to get to additional insights. So we see it almost as peeling away layers of the onion, starting with that zero-party data. Yes, I have permission to communicate with you. fostering a dialogue which will generate first-party data that's transactional in nature so that I can start to better behaviorally understand you, and then linking it to third-party data so that I can start to humanize and profile and personify you. So we see that as sort of like the journey, starting with the zero and then augmenting it with the other data sources.
Great. Now, April, you've heard a lot of different definitions of these different types of data. What are some of the your perspective on the pitfalls and challenges given all these definitions of these types of data?
Yeah, Andy, it's a great question. And first, let me say I am so delighted to be here. Baltimore's my hometown, and the Innovation Week program is such a fabulous program. So I'm really, really thrilled to be part of it. So thanks for putting this together. So one of the challenges, of course, is that by and large, these definitions are not captured in any of the laws or regulations that deal with data. And so it makes it very difficult if you're a company or a brand that is dealing with information in any way to figure out how these concepts of zero-party, first, second, third-party data should fit into your compliance program. How it should fit into your privacy notices where you're advising, if you're customer facing, where you're advising your customers about what you're collecting, or how you should incorporate that into contracts if you're in a B2B kind of sort of sector. And so the fact that we have this sort of rich set of definitions in the marketing and data businesses that are not aligned with any regulatory definitions makes certainty and compliance challenging for starters.
Great, thank you. Let's go on to the next question here. Loyalty programs. Some of you on the panel have a lot of experience working in loyalty. So those types of programs, they can offer a bridge between the brand's need and a customer's willingness to offer zero-party info. Do businesses or brands need a loyalty program these days? Is it table stakes? And why or why not? Jatinder, can we start with you?
So I think, there are some amazing stats out there regarding loyalty programs. I think the average US consumer is enrolled in 21 loyalty programs. So obviously there are a whole plethora of organizations that are undertaking loyalty in the effort of sort of like, generating incremental revenue. So is it necessary? I think many would say yes, it is. But again, I would see loyalty as not being the outcome of sort of like, I would start with what are the core business objectives? And then once we've sort of like determined what the objectives are for your business, then determine if and how a loyalty program features as part of the overall ecosystem. I think the other thing is that a loyalty program can sometimes feel overwhelming, right? So we have brands that sort of like have really set the stage, and our consumers' expectations are that the loyalty program is as clever as Google, it's as local as Facebook, it's as easy as Apple, as visual as Instagram, as immediate as WhatsApp, as personal as Amazon, as on-demand as Uber, and as entertaining as YouTube. Those are some pretty high expectations for a brand to achieve, but it's because those brands have set the standard, they are the standard bearer. The consumer expects that from every brand. So my recommendation is, as we try to aim towards nirvana with all of those new economy brands, is to start small, is to start with something almost as a proof of concept and say, okay, if I believe that loyalty is really going to be able to impact my business, what can I do today? And maybe it's as simple as an email program, right? So if you've gone out with a zero-party data strategy, individuals have raised their hands and said, yes, I would like to have a dialogue with you, brand X. How do you start to foster that dialogue that ultimately leads to the journey of loyalty? So don't feel overwhelmed, but do start with doing something if it's appropriate for your business and you've built a business case around that. So those are some recommendations that I would make, is look at it in relation to your overarching ecosystem, go along a journey and sort of like get some quick wins along the way and be pragmatic about it and learn from the best as well. And also obviously look at what's unique and what's the white space that nobody's doing within your category. And innovate in those areas.
Melanie, you've got an interesting perspective being in the grocery industry. Can you talk about loyalty programs, whether they're table stakes, whether you need one?
So really similar to Jatinder, I think it depends on the industry, but from a grocery retail perspective, it is absolutely table stakes, especially in traditional grocery. Even if it's just providing some level of benefits or reward through a loyalty card, that's kind of the most basic form at this point from a grocery retail perspective. That being said, there are some super popular brands out there, like Trader Joe's, who doesn't have a loyalty program. They don't really have a CRM program to speak of, other than I think a newsletter that they send out. And they are extremely successful, but I think it's because they are so, they're not necessarily traditional grocery, they are more niche. So from a business standpoint, outside of just grocery retail, I think it's really good to look at the amount of competition. As Jatinder said, what are your business goals and objectives? And really see if a loyalty program can help set you apart from that other competition. Customers like to feel like they are valued. So anything you can do from a loyalty perspective or a CRM perspective to provide that benefit to them is going to help you gain their loyalty.
Great. April, from, again, your kind of point of view on this, what do you see as the value of the loyalty program to businesses?
So I think, when you look at the sort of the consumer privacy concerns around marketing data and the consumer privacy perspective, by and large, the thing that creates either legal trouble or brand trouble is surprise, right? And so consumers don't like to be surprised about where their data is going. And the thing that's really useful about a loyalty program, of course, is that tends to be information that consumers tend to have a really good sense of what is being collected about them and how. They know, for example, that a grocery store is tracking their purchases made with the loyalty card, and they know when they are providing information online to a website through a survey or, response questionnaire or things like that. Consumers tend not to be concerned about that because they know where the data is going. Now, they might get concerned if it's being shared with third parties in ways they don't anticipate. And that's where the privacy policies on websites and for programs become so important. Because getting to the point of potential legal issues, what regulators really look for is whether or not the company is saying what they do with personal data and doing what they say with personal data. So those are kind of the twin pillars of, from a legal compliance and regulatory perspective. Are you saying what you do, and are you doing what you say? And as long as you are avoiding surprise, there's quite a lot of latitude in what brands can do. And some consumers who are much more privacy focused may decide, well, I don't want to participate in that particular program because I don't like the way that data is used or shared. Other consumers will say, I'm less concerned about that. I really like what I get in the way of that sense of personalized, kind of information and opportunities. So it allows consumers to make those sort of informed judgments. So it's all about really avoiding surprise. Of course, there's some particular laws and regulations that have to be complied with, but broadly speaking, it's about avoiding surprise.
Right. Now we talk about zero-party data, and that's the data that customers and consumers are going to provide willingly and knowingly to a business or brand. But many times people aren't always truthful with the information that they willingly and knowingly provide. Kristen, you talked about the assessment on your website to help people and identify how to help them with their weight loss program. How can personalization of marketing based on this zero-party data be as reliable or as effective as the type of personalization you can do with website activity and purchase behavior?
Yeah, I think you can avoid having doubt in the data that you get from, for example, for our assessment, if you have that clear value proposition and plan on, how you're going to use it, and very thoughtful about what you're asking. You're not asking questions just to ask them. You're going to use it to personalize their experience. Data is valuable, and you need to build trust to get it. Really make clear how you'll use the data. As a team, as you're building these programs, make sure that you're asking for data that is actually meaningful and that you have a plan to use it to really personalize the experience. So there was a lot of thought and planning that went into building that assessment, and it was very much customer focused. And I think, customers can see that. If you build an experience that they see value in, there's a lot less chance that you're going to get information that's not accurate, because they see the value of giving that information. They're going to get something from us that's very much tailored to them. There's a way, the HMR program tailored to their specific needs.
Jatinder, in your role overseeing an entire, team globally of data, how do you close that gap between truth and what somebody actually provides, and identify how you can really get to the heart of what that consumer wants?
So yeah, I think it's that balance of sort of like, people telling you one thing and doing another thing. So, obviously self-reported data is extremely important, and we use that often to make decisions, be it around loyalty, CRM, personalization, and content decisions as well. But one of the things I always say is that actions speak louder than words. So at one point in time, I obviously gave you permission. I raised my hand and I said, this is the way that I want to engage with you. We then work with clients and brands to say, okay, how do we deliver upon those expectations and those needs? And then we will go out and sort of like start to communicate with those individuals. Now, they're either going to react or not to that sort of like, that communication strategy. And if I told you that I wanted sort of like, information about 1, 2, and 3, and I start to communicate to you about 1, 2, and 3, but then I don't see a response or an action, that means one thing, either sort of like that's not what you actually wanted to receive information about, or what's probably happened is that 1, 2, and 3 is actually what you wanted to receive at that point in time, but now your needs have changed, right? So we say it's not a one and done. So we've got to constantly ask for that information and say, great, you told us this piece of information at this point in time. Let's go back out to those consumers and say, is this still relevant? So how have your needs changed? And I think it goes back to having that ongoing dialogue. And so the other thing is obviously testing. So if I'm communicating with you and then suddenly I'm seeing a non-response, that's also insightful as well. So one of the other things we then start to do is to sort of like test and say, okay, well, you're not reacting to these particular sort of like messages, content, offers, that, whatever the value exchange is. What else is it that you could be interested in? So then we can test sort of like our way into that and say, oh, actually you started to react to 4, 5, and 6. So now that's sort of like telling me that that's what you're interested in. As I said, actions always speak louder than words. But the second thing is to continue to ask for sort of like, what is it that you're looking for, and to foster that trust and that dialogue.
So April, there's a lot of discussion about asking for data, collecting that data, using it in various ways. How can a business, be it a small business for the entrepreneurs listening, or an established brand like some of the marketing and agency executives listening, how does a business educate the average consumer when most don't even know what's being tracked or understand it? What are some of the ways that a business can be transparent to earn and keep that customer's trust?
Key sort of centerpiece, if you will, is that website privacy policy. That's where everybody is going to go to look to find out, what's being collected, how it's being used, who, if anyone, it's being shared with, and for what purposes. Of course, the way that website policies, privacy policies are written is often fairly broad. So a policy might refer to, we share with our marketing partners. And so one of the things that's going to be really important for entrepreneurs, for new businesses starting out, to understand is that it's really important to know what regulatory scheme might apply to the data you're collecting. You can be an emerging business with a website presence that is physically located in the greater Baltimore region, but have customers who are in the EU, the European Union, who are in California. You need to know that the fact that your physical presence is in Maryland doesn't prevent you from being subject to the laws of other states and other countries if you are actively marketing to consumers there. the details of it can get a little bit complicated when you look at the specific laws, but the basic thing to know is that if you're proactively marketing to people in the European Union, the European regulators do assert that they have the ability to regulate how you collect and process EU personal data. And the definition of personal data is very broad. It includes everything about an individual who is identified or identifiable. So the information they're voluntarily providing, that's that zero-party data, website tracking, all of those things. With respect to California, the California Consumer Privacy Act means that businesses above a certain size, you have to meet a certain threshold, that do business in California are subject to similar laws relating to the collection of a very wide range of information about California consumers. So the kinds of things we've been talking about, like grocery store purchasing habits or information volunteered on the HRM site about diet goals, those things are the kinds of data that, although not specifically restricted under every state law, are governed under some state laws. And more states are looking at how to regulate this kind of information. There's lots of focus on a potential federal privacy legislation that doesn't exist yet. And more states are looking at state privacy laws, like the newly enacted Virginia state privacy law. So the main thing to know is that that privacy policy, again, is going to be that's going to be the heart of how you communicate with customers, with regulators, if necessary or appropriate, what it is that you do with that data. It's really important to be thoughtful, really important to be accurate, and really important to know, based on your business, the kinds of data you collect, where your customer base is, all of those things, what those laws are that you might be subject to.
That's great. Melanie, from your position as managing the loyalty program for Giant Food, what are some other steps that you can take or you take in educating the consumer and also preparing other departments and teams within Giant that may also get asked questions? What are some of the things that you're doing to sort of support that?
Sure. And honestly, Andy, it's not only our loyalty program, obviously, that the privacy policy impacts. We collect data on our websites. We have obviously our purchase behavior and our first party data. So really, we make that privacy policy as readily available as possible to all of our consumers and give them that opportunity to read through it across multiple different channels. So any kind of digital channel that we are out on, there's a link out to the privacy policy from our emails. It is front and center on our website. We don't hide it. And one of the areas that we find super important is also just making sure that our call center is aware of our privacy policy as much as possible so that they're equipped to handle the questions and concerns coming in from our customers, because they're the ones who are hearing it. I don't get those emails and those phone calls directly. So making sure that we're equipping the people who are actually, getting those questions and making sure that they have the information to pass along to our customers is extremely, extremely important.
That's great. Kristen, with HMR and other colleagues and folks in your network, what are you doing and how are you preparing and looking ahead with things like, as mentioned, GDPR, the California policy, changes with iOS and Google in terms of data tracking and cookies? What are you doing and what have you heard others doing as businesses to prepare for those changes?
Yeah, so we are based in Boston, but we are a national brand. So we do business in California, and we, it was a struggle with CCPA really understanding what we had to do. And there was, some cloudiness in the regulations in the beginning. But, what we've realized is that, you can't just carve out a part of your business for your California customers. We've really implemented these safeguards for all of our customers. And, upped our first party data collection strategy so that, we can make sure that we collect it in a way that's very transparent, making sure that the privacy policy is easy to read, that consumers have a way to contact us if they want information on their data. I mean, that was something that we had never done before. And, And it was a requirement to make sure that there was somebody that they could call and that we would be able to pull up their data and tell them where it was. Again, though, I think that rigor is good for your brand in general. It forces you to see the value and really protect that customer data, which builds your brand and trust and loyalty.
That's great. Jatinder, what are your thoughts on both educating the consumer and sort of what these different policies will have on that information education that you provide and how you market?
So I think it's a lot of what's already being said by the other panelists. It is about the trust, that sort of like, and fostering that trust and transparency and being very clear about what the brand's policy is. How is it going to use that data? What purpose is it going to be used for? How long is it going to be sort of like collected for? Where is it going to be stored? So I think those are the conversations that we're having with the different brands that we work with. April also mentioned obviously the complexity of the laws as well, not just sort of like laws that are within the US from a federal and a state perspective, but many of our clients are global in scale as well. So then recognizing how do we do business outside of the US regarding GDPR, but it's going to sort of like back to being very clear about sort of like, with the consumer, I am asking for this data. I am going to do these things with it. Are you okay with us doing that? Yes or no? And if obviously we want that answer to be yes. So being clear and being explicit around that, letting consumers know if and when those policies change so that they can continue to sort of like have a dialogue with us or not. I mean, we're very fortunate, I think, within Omnicom, we're an organization of 80,000 employees in 200 markets. And with that complexity, obviously, we have to be compliant with local, national, and international laws. So we actually have a 25-person data privacy practice. So whenever we are engaging with a client or looking to sort of like get a new engagement, I'm very fortunate that I can go and tap into that resource as well and to have those experts. And I recognize that many of the organizations that are on the call today are significantly smaller, but I would say that the same applies. It's sort of like, being very clear about the data that you're collecting, being transparent with your consumers as to what you're going to be doing with it. If you at any point change, let them know and let them know that they have the ability to stop doing business with you. I just think it goes back to being transparent and being clear about what you're doing. And as those needs change, going back and letting them know what you're going to do with that information.
So we talked a lot about the data being collected and consumer and businesses collecting that and how they use it and being transparent with all of these policies. But April, as a consumer, and we're all consumers, everybody on this call, is it even possible to not provide some level of personal data throughout the day? How does a consumer mitigate this risk that's sort of always there?
Yeah, it's almost impossible not to. If you think about the way that technology has, data-driven technologies specifically have really sort of exploded in the last 20 years, it's remarkable. If you think about it, Facebook was first launched in 2004. It is less than 20 years old, and it now has 3 billion users around the globe, right? And of course, you provide data to Facebook not only when you're on the platform, but also often if you're, visiting websites that have Facebook plugins like the Facebook like button and things like that, right? Smartphones, the first iPhone was just launched in 2007. Again, not even 15 years old. And yet our smartphones that we all carry with us all the time collect an astonishing amount of data about us, real-time geolocation information. We store our contact lists on there, our calendars, our emails. We have lots and lots of apps of all kinds, some that we use for entertainment, some that we use for utility, right? And none of these things are inherently bad, right? We've all reaped all kinds of benefits from this data-driven set of technologies, whether those benefits are efficiency or entertainment or access to information or connection with other people. But it is really important to recognize just how much data we're generating. And it's funny, on the point about smartphones, there was a survey not too long ago that indicated that not only do we all carry them with us all the time, but something like 14% of Americans admit to having their smartphone in the shower with them, right? So we are really glued to these devices. So the first place to start is from an individual perspective to look at when you're using your phone or you're going to websites or you're deciding whether to download an app. Do you know what your privacy settings are? Are you looking at whether or not you're allowing apps on your mobile device to share data across apps, across the platform, from your mobile device to your tablet or your laptop or whatever? Again, some people really are quite happy to do all of that cross-platform, cross-app, cross-device sharing because they feel that they gain benefits from it. Other people find that really creepy and would rather not. So one of the things that there is an increasing awareness around the risks to data privacy from all of these devices and applications. And as a result, there are an increasing array of privacy protective options available, whether that is using anonymized browsers like DuckDuckGo instead of one of the other major browsers, search engines rather, whether it's setting the privacy settings in your smartphone to restrict sharing, whether it's choosing not to download or install particular apps or visit particular websites. So I think it really starts from that place of information because individuals view so differently what amount of information they would like to part with. It's important to be able to exercise our choice in the way that fits us individually.
That's great. And April won't plug it, but I will mention that she has written a book on this very topic. So she knows what she's talking about, and this is available, but a lot of that, what she just highlighted is in that book. So we can have more information to check that out. So I have two more questions for each of the panelists before we wrap up here. The first question, and Kristen, we'll start with you. What advice would you offer the entrepreneurs listening and the marketers and the agency folks that are listening if they are considering a CRM or loyalty program?
As a customer experience person, I would say, always focus on that. Keep it to the customer. What will actually provide value to your customers? That will provide value to your business. There is a direct correlation. So make sure that your team understands that too, is that it's not just the business reason. Of course, that drives it, but are you actually really providing value to your customer? So as you're building this, keep the customer at the center of all of your decisions.
So Melanie, what advice do you have for the entrepreneurs and marketers listening if they're thinking about a CRM or some type of loyalty program?
Sure. So both are obviously extremely powerful tools, as I said previously, that can help set you apart from the competition. The first kind of piece of advice I would give is just to make sure that your strategies that you build are grounded in the data and your long-term business goals. This shouldn't be a reactionary kind of what can we do quick. This should be a long-term plan. But with that said, you also really need to be willing and able to pivot and adjust really quickly based on not only the results that you're seeing of your current communications and programs, but changes in the industry. What is your competition doing? What are, some of the big stakeholders in other industries doing? And most importantly, really, what is the behavior of your customer telling you? How can you kind of drive that behavior in the direction that you want it to go through those communication channels and programs? That's what we did with flexible rewards. We had a gas program previously, and we have pivoted to a program that now allows our customers to use their points for more than just gas. They can use it on grocery purchases, which closes that loyalty loop. They can use it on free items, and we're working on some partnership opportunities. So you really just need to evolve and make sure that you don't stay stagnant for too long. And then finally, if you're going to do it, just make sure that you're doing it well. I know Jatinder mentioned, finding partners from a data mining perspective, but also find partners to help you build the frameworks, because if an experience, whether it's CRM or loyalty, isn't a solid experience and a good experience for your customer, you're really going to struggle for it to be successful.
great. And Jatinder, what about you? What advice would you have to offer?
I think it's many of the things that have been said just there by Melanie. I would also, as you're starting to venture into an initiative like this, again, go back to sort of like, what are the objectives? I would start there. Sometimes I use now, next, future, crawl, walk, run, those kinds of analogies. So what can we do pragmatically, and what can we do to get some quick wins as well? So what's the objective? How are you going to use CRM and loyalty to, to achieve that objective? Melanie mentioned there, and it's one of our tenets. We have 15 tenets of what we call CRM and loyalty. We call it the total customer experience. So it should be grounded in a human truth, and that's data that's going to enable you to get there. And we use a combination of qualitative and quantitative data, right? So that's sort of like is the first pillar, and we've got a series of tenets beyond that, underneath that. Secondly is that it needs to deliver upon a spectrum of value. So initially it might be okay just to go with a very transactional based CRM program, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's many brands that are doing that. It's all about points and prizes. But ultimately, you want to build towards sort of like fostering an emotional connection, so that consumers are going to want to do business with your brand versus somebody else that's in your competitive set. So I would sort of like start with some of the basics, get some objectives, get some blocking and tackling done, look at what's working and what's not. Test your way into that using a spectrum of sort of like, different value exchange, financial, functional, experiential, personal, and social, and then look at using those to foster that connection that's going to differentiate you in the marketplace. But start somewhere and use data to ground it.
That's great. Thank you. And April, what about you? What advice would you have for the entrepreneurs and marketers and agency folks here?
Yeah, so the good news is that what's good business sense is also good legal sense. And so starting with some of those principles that Melanie was pointing to, really that, Kristen and Jatinder, that everybody's talked about making sure that you have a reason for the data you're collecting, that you're not collecting stuff randomly, that you know how you're going to use it and why you're going to use it. Not only is that good for business and good for customer relationships, it's also good from a legal perspective. Some of the greatest pitfalls from a legal risk perspective come when companies or organizations collect more data than they need, hold it for longer than they need, or when they collect it for one purpose but end up using it for other purposes without notifying the people about whom the data relates. So really important to have a sense, because this is an increasingly regulated field, and because the regulations around data privacy tend to align more with the location of residence of the individual than the location of the business. So really important to know that if you're just starting out in these areas and you're thinking, what do I have to comply with? Don't think that if you're in Maryland, you only have to comply with Maryland law. Make sure you consult with somebody who can help you understand, based on your business and the kind of data you're interacting with, all the laws that might apply. And be really thoughtful so that whatever your regulatory obligations are, you're collecting just what you need for particular purposes, being transparent about how it's used and not holding it longer than you need to. Those are kind of the core principles. When you're working with really experienced marketing consultants and firms, as Jatinder pointed out, very often they will have a whole data privacy team that can help provide that consulting. There's also lots of lawyers who do that work. It's really important to know that these can be serious pitfalls. So make sure that you're getting that sort of experienced advice. If you're not in the marketing business, make sure you're getting that experienced legal and other kinds of compliance advice that you need.
That's great. And April, I'm going to stick with you for this last question, which again, I'll ask the entire panel. What is your line in the sand when it comes to consumer data, personalization, and digital marketing?
That is such a great question. I think that the thing that worries me most is when people look at a fresh new technology, algorithms, machine learning, things like that, new apps and opportunities, and say, let's do it because we can, rather than let's do it because we should. And I think that's the really important thing.
Great. Kristen, what about you? What's your line in the sand when it comes to data personalization and digital marketing?
Yeah, I think in terms of data, we will never sell our customer data. That's just, something that we are not willing to do. And like April said, it's not just collecting data for the sake of collecting it, being really thoughtful and making sure that we're collecting it to improve the customer experience. And that we're not asking for too much too soon. As Jatinder said, it's a date, not a marriage, right? So making sure that we build that trust by being really intentional about what we need.
That's great. Melanie, what are your thoughts? What's your line in the sand? And it could be professionally or it could be, personally in your daily life.
Sure. So, I'll start from a business standpoint, very similar to what Kristen said. Everything we do is built around our shoppers' needs, and collecting data is important to that purpose. We really focus on kind of 5 principles. One is we stay consistent with our values and our ethics, integrity, care, being a better place to work, and being a better place to shop. We are transparent with how we collect, store, and use. We don't sell our customer data. We apply the modern safeguards to really make sure that the way that we collect and how long we store our data is mitigating any risks. And we really, hold our vendor partners as well. We are a company that has vendor partners, and while we don't sell our data, we do work closely with, Response Labs and other partners, and we hold them to those same standards. We make sure that they know what our rules and regulations are, and make sure that they follow those as well. And then from a consumer standpoint, I just try to really remain a conscious consumer, and knowing that in the world of loyalty, I often get better benefits and rewards by providing my data. I just make sure that I do the research and engage with the brands that I am comfortable engaging with.
Jatinder, go ahead and you can wrap us up here with your thoughts on your line in the sand when it comes to consumer data, personalization, and digital marketing.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think it'd be many of the things that the other panelists have said. I think it goes back to transparency. For me, the line in the sand is that we're using the data for marketing purposes, right? So I would start there. And what does that mean for an organization? So being clear and transparent about how I'm using it, what I'm going to be using it for. As I said, we've got 15 tenants in 3 pillars that are around about, I want to use that information to try and get some insights into those consumers so that we can start to sort of develop suites of products and services that are going to enable them to interact with the brand and sort of be meaningful for them. Obviously, that sort of so that it also adds value to the organization fiscally as well, but ultimately that it develops that emotional connection with a brand as well. So that's sort of is my line in the sand, is that we're being thoughtful, respectful, compliant, and that it's delivering value for the consumer and ultimately for the brand as well. So I'd say it's those 5 things. And if we do those, I think we respect the consumer data and they respect the relationship that they have with us to build that emotional bond as well.
That's great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Thank you for attending. This has been recorded and will be available. And we really thank you all. Please go out and check out the other sessions for Baltimore Innovation Week, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.